with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, while the other, a doctor from UCLA. The passenger's injuries ranging from broken ribs to fractures. All are expected to survive. In its third weekend release, The Batman continuing its reign as the weekend box office champ.
Robert Pattinson's debut as the Dark Knight earned an additional $36.8 million over the weekend, pushing it just over $300 million in domestic receipts. The Warner Brothers film is the highest-grossing movie of 2022 and the second highest since the beginning of the pandemic. The biggest competitor this weekend was the anime Jujutsu Kaisen, taking an estimated $17.7 million in its first weekend in North America. The Japanese film is based on the best-selling manga and is available to watch in subtitles. Action movie Uncharted lands at the number 3 spot, making $8 million. At number 4, the horror film X is projected to gross around $4.4 million. And rounding out at number 5 is Channing Tatum's heartwarming film Dog with $4.1 million.
Fox's Mary Corsetti. The Oscar is taking place March 27th. West Side Story star Rachel Ziegler saying she was not invited to the award show. I'm Laura Cantor, and this is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
We're already Pika's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Here we are in the most beautiful time of the whole week. We are just 7 minutes into Tall Tales. We've got 5 whole days minus 7 minutes to go here. Jose and I, if you could see Jose grinning like a Cheshire cat inside of his booth there, we couldn't be happier. So let's start right out with, let me get my Facebook set up here. Something's wrong. Something happens to my Facebook every day, Jose. It starts out okay, and about this time it freezes. And then I got to get it in another window. You ever notice it? It's a
conspiracy. Yeah, it freezes a lot at this time.
Yeah, it's probably something to do with the management of Facebook trying to cancel me, right?
That means we're doing something good.
Probably, yeah. That is the kind of the Academy Awards of information radio. Okay, let's go straight to Jemmy Ikotny. I'm going to reverse the polarity a little bit here today. Instead of starting out with the Daily News editorial, I'm going to start out with Lee Weber's letter to the editor, which really sheds a light on the Daily News editorial and just as much light on the editorial policy of the newspaper in which Weber's column appears, which means the Daily Post. And then just to spice it up a little bit, I'm going to go to the national side and talk a little bit about the New York Times and what a travesty it has turned into. Okay, starting out with Lee Weber. The air is getting thicker and thicker with political rhetoric, bad things about political competitors, and empty or literally undeliverable promises that those that making them should know they really cannot turn into reality. Yet they will tell you these things because they know that's what you want to hear. That, in turn, will garner your vote for them come November. They have grown to know, and far too many citizens have grown to depend upon, the government and government officials elected and appointed to fulfill daily needs that would otherwise be self-supplied vis-a-vis personal responsibility and work. And we commented on the Daily News editorial on Friday on that same point, didn't we? Yeah, oh, we're so generous here. Our government does this, our government does that.
Hooray.
As we watch the citizens and average people of the Ukraine dying to protect their right to freedom and self-governance, we simultaneously watch the people of our own island and the mainland hold out their hand for government subsidies. They, year after year, re-elect the same people again and again who literally fail to help them become more self-sufficient. Rather, they work diligently to make them dependent upon the government for everyday needs. The real role of government officials, employees in a democracy, is to protect and defend those who have chosen to elevate them into positions of authority and to do so as efficiently as possible. I've contrasted my idea of what Republicans' idea of government is and what Democrats' idea of government is. Here it is. The Republican idea is that it's the government's job to secure and protect liberty and individual freedom. The Democrats' idea is to make people's lives better. Yeah. Well, how could you possibly go with the first one?
I'd like to make an amendment.
Yes, sir.
With your money.
With your money. Exactly. Yeah. Very good. The government's job is to guard citizens' rights to open and honest government that protects and ensures the enforcement of the rule of law while simultaneously ensuring an open and honest government. At least that's what our forefathers had in mind when they drafted the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Somehow those original intentions for our great republic have gone astray from the center and are now leaning heavily to the left as the general public is becoming more and more dependent upon government to supply far too many things beyond protection and freedom. We have allowed these new news organizations, the original watchdog on government and the fourth estate in our great republic, to be little more than a center for entertainment, or worse, mouthpieces and purveyors of political speak. See why I read this one first? In far too many instances, reporters and editors have become lazy, running nothing more than press releases, rather than seeking out the true sources of information and double and triple checking their facts. It's rare today to see news organization, local, national, and international, aggressively taking on the leaders in government and truly exposing the wrongful and at times criminal acts perpetrated on the very people who put them in office. Easy money and self-interest have become more the rule as opposed to challenging the oft-times illegal or at the very least unrealistic and poorly thought out economic decisions coming from those placed in public office. Is he talking about Amanda Shelton and her idea of spending $150 million in the biggest wealth transfer program we've seen on the island?
I'll pass and answer the second time you ask me.
Okay. What has happened to the once prolific, hard-hitting editorial opinion pieces in our local news organizations, print and broadcast. Even cable TV back in the days used to have editorials. Lee Holmes was the owner, and every once in a while he'd get a bug under his blanket, and he'd go on camera. Man, that guy would really lay it out. Even the TV station.
Wasn't there a name for that? I remember seeing that either at the end of the news programs where there was just an editorial, and there was a segment like that, but it started on Guam Cable.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Editorial writing that once took elected officials to task for poorly thought out proposals, or even worse, one-sided effort at helping their cronies, powerful and political supporters with economic or power plays. The pendulum of hard-hitting opinion pieces has swung too far to the left, and the time has come for it to make its way back to the center if we hope to maintain a free press, truly free press, in our ever-weakening democratic form of government. Not only in a hope to maintain a truly free press, but to maintain a truly free country, which is getting away from it really, really fast. When you see Yale law students shouting down someone who comes to give them a lecture, it's close. We may be at the tipping point, because these are the guys and gals, that when they get out of Yale Law School are going to be pulling the levers of power. Yale and Harvard, a little bit of Columbia maybe. And if they start out that way in law school, what are they going to be like when they've got real power? Freedom of speech? What's that all about?
In response to what happened there at that law university, they kept the name, but they just respelled it. YELL. We yell law.
Exactly. Yale College, New Haven, Connecticut. All right, here's another piece that comes from The Blaze. New York Times readers revolt after editorial board offers a defense of free speech.
Wasn't that an amazing... just to watch that happen on Twitter was incredible.
Yeah. Okay, this I got from, The Blaze. It's by a guy named Chris Pandolfo. The opinion journalists on the New York Times editorial board published a 2,500-word essay Friday declaring there's a crisis of confidence around free speech in America, finally saying out loud what many conservatives have warned about for years. In the lengthy editorial, the Times lamented that Americans are losing hold of a fundamental right as citizens of a free country, the right to speak their minds and voice their opinions in public without fear of being shamed or shunned, even if you say something that a lot of people don't like. How is this happening? Quote, the political left and right are caught in a destructive loop of condemnation and recrimination around cancel culture, the editorial board wrote. Accompanying the editorial are the results of new national poll commissioned by Times Opinion and Siena College. The poll shows the effect of cancel culture, with only 34% of respondents saying they believe that all Americans enjoy the freedom of speech completely. The vast majority of U.S. adults, 84%, said it is, quote, very serious or somewhat serious problem that some Americans feel they cannot speak freely without retaliation or harsh criticism. 671-888-8255, 93.FM, 4 to 6, 6 to 10 a.m. More than half of respondents, 55%, say they had personally held their tongues over the past year because they feared how people react to what they said, self-censorship. At the same time, 22% of adults reported that they had retaliated against or were harshly critical of someone else over something they said. Adults 18 to 34 years old were far more likely to have done so than older Americans. Liberals were more likely to have done so than moderates or conservatives, the editorial board wrote. Oh, well, that's a surprise, isn't it? In typical fashion, the board placed blame on both sides, of course, for increasing hostility toward free speech with added emphasis on how conservatives are allegedly more extreme. But admitting that there's a problem is a good first step for the paper, which in recent years has had several high-profile controversies over its own writers being canceled for angering their progressive colleagues.
Didn't one of them resign because of that?
Yeah, what's her name? Weiss.
Yes, Weiss.
Yeah, and then an editor got booted because he ran Tom Cotton's op-ed.
That's right.
Calling freedom of speech, quote, the bedrock of democratic government, the board expressed grave concern about how progressives appear to have lost faith in the principle of free speech. In the course of the fight for tolerance, many progressives have the fight for tolerance. Yeah. Many progressives have become intolerant of those who disagree with them or express other opinions and take on a kind of self-righteousness and censoriousness that the right long displayed and the left long abhorred. Yeah, we used to think of liberals, they're the free speech guys, right? But as would be expected, the paper was harsher towards conservatives. It is the New York Times, after all, accusing Republican-controlled legislatures of attempting to gag discussion of certain topics. Now here's the context. Legislatures like the Don't Say Gay bill in the Florida legislature. Legislatures are coming forward saying, don't try to run this critical race theory crap into first, second, and third grade. If you're not smart enough, school officials, to do it yourself, we'll pass a law. And that's where the gagging has come in on the conservative side. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that when it comes to impressionable young children. What is expressed to them is subject to control by adults. Some of the harshest laws in the country deal with child pornography. And I was doing a little work on continuing legal education course today, and it was the guy put out the lecturer used an example of the kind of people that he defended in private practice. Bankers, scout leaders, hockey team coaches, pretty well-to-do, upper middle-class folks that somehow got into this child pornography thing. And he said when he sat them down to counsel them and tell them that what they had done is a mandatory minimum 15 years in prison. It was like going to your doctor and being diagnosed with a brain tumor. But that's how serious we take this stuff. If you're under 18, if you're 17 years and 11 months and 29 days, and somebody sends you the wrong kind of pornography, that's what you're looking at.
Even if it seems innocent, 16 and 17-year-olds are being tagged now as sexual offenders.
Uh-huh.
Just because of that. And they want to do this for first to third graders?
Yeah. So the point I'm making here is that when you're dealing with children, people under 18, it's not a free-for-all. And the legislature has a perfect right, as you were, the power and the absolute necessity to step in when school officials don't know what the hell they're doing.
And it's interesting how just that concern, parents having concern for their children, which they ought to and have a right to, gets twisted in the media, and it becomes a don't say gay bill.
Exactly.
Where no such language even exists in this bill.
The word gay doesn't appear in the bill.
Or concept.
Yeah. Going on with the editorial. In passing laws that restrict speech, conservatives have adopted the language of harm that some liberals have used in the past to restrict speech. The idea that speech itself can cause unacceptable harm. Can it? Yes. If the audience is children, it certainly can. New York Times, which has led to a proliferation of campus speech codes. things like don't holler, F you, in the middle of somebody else's lecture. That's the kind of speech codes, right? And the use of trigger warnings in college classrooms. Boy, trigger warnings. Talk about somewhere where there ought to be legislation. There ought to be a strict code about trigger warnings, you know?
I don't care if you believe me or not, but this stupidity meter is very strong when it comes to trigger warnings.
It is.
It works.
It does. Trigger warnings. Yeah, I know. I eat breakfast on Saturday mornings down in Touré, my favorite restaurant, with some guys that pack, right? You talk about trigger warnings. And Joe San Augustine with this stand your ground law. Man, that's a trigger warning writ large. After accusations that many conservatives call unfair, the board concluded with a condemnation of cancel culture, noting that legal limits are not the only constraints on Americans' freedom of speech. On college campuses and many workplaces, speech that others find harmful or offensive can result not only in online shaming, but also in the loss of a livelihood. Yeah, I read an article today about a teacher at a college who went into the faculty lounge and he found a stack of hard left flyers dealing with transgenderism. So he took a look at it and he wrote a note on the blackboard, "Please don't leave garbage behind in the teacher's lounge." He got fired.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
He got fired for that. Of course, the judge put him back, gave him his job back, but that's how serious it is.
There are some curriculums now, what do they call it when the teacher gives the syllabus, where they've had to remove books from the syllabus that they've taught on for decades or for a couple of years that trigger people, you know, like boy, things that have the N-word in. I don't know if we can say it over the air, but things like that are part of curriculums, but because they're triggering, people have lost their whole syllabuses. Professors have to redo their whole method of teaching.
No wonder Huckleberry Finn, you know, kids, when I was a youngster, I was like everybody else. I'd much rather be outside playing, but you always had a library book. Remember that? You always had a library book. And, man, I read Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn like I was eating candy, but you can't use them anymore. Trigger warnings, especially Huck Finn.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Going down the river.
Yeah. After more accusations that many conservatives would call unfair, the board concluded with a condemnation of cancel culture, noting that legal limits are not the only constraints on Americans' freedom of speech. I already covered that part, didn't I? This message was not well received among Times readers. Of course not. Now, I read the New York Times, but, you know, I guess I'm an example. I really don't like to admit it around my friends because they'll shame me.
How dare you?
Bob, couldn't you find your copy of Dick and Jane? Yeah. The message was not well received among Times readers who called the editorial appalling. Raw Story, which I read every day, collected some of the top comments on the article in which Times left-wing audience castigated the paper for creating a false equivalency between progressives and conservatives. This editorial is appalling, one reader from Baltimore said. Clearly, the editorial board is feeling touchy about widespread ridicule of its recent decision to characterize as a political crisis and undergrad's discomfort at expressing her opinions in class. I guess you need to be reminded that the First Amendment does not guarantee the right not to be shamed or shunned. Thank God for that. You are creating a false equivalency between private citizens' opposition to willful disinformation and points of view they find objectionable and the recent Republican craze for using the levers of government to stifle discussion of particular topics. The Baltimore commenter was referring to an op-ed the Times published earlier this month, authored by a college senior who criticized cancel culture at her school and described how students self-censor to avoid harassment for speaking their minds. The paper was blasted by left-wing pundits for giving her a platform, and she was viciously mocked for expressing her opinion. Other Times readers assailed the board for being even remotely critical of the left. Did that sound kind of familiar? Yeah.
Just recently, they had the NCAA women's swim meet championships. And a lot of questions that came around is, how come none of the swimmers are protesting or commenting on that transgender?
Lee Johnson, I think, is
Thompson,
it's all the same thing.
Yeah. And a lot of them spoke off record and said, we are afraid to say anything. If we say anything, we're going to get canceled, we're going to get harassed, doxxed, anything like that. So they remain silent and just swim.
Yep, absolutely.
It's a form of terrorism, right? According to their definition.
And according to them, speech is violence.
Exactly.
If you don't like the speech is violence. Yeah. So if I say, Jose, go jump in the lake, that's an assault.
I'm going to have to go see my therapist.
Okay, so the sentence says, other Times readers assail the board for being even remotely critical of the left. Now, that sounds very familiar because in the Soviet Union, you couldn't even be remotely critical. If you said something like, yesterday I went to the toilet and it wouldn't flush, you in a heap of trouble. Yeah. A reader from New York wrote, quote, it seems to me this editorial went really far out of its way to attempt to blame the left and the right evenly for cancel culture. But it's not the left that's burning books, nor is it the right. You know, a nice metaphor. It's not the left that are attacking people in school board meetings. Yeah, there you go. In our capital, on social media, and day in, day out. It's not the left news shows that are spreading misinformation daily. And it's not the left that have members of Congress shouting out in chambers as if they're calling to a rival at a NASCAR event. Let's go, Brandon. Once again, the false equivalency between left and right helps normalize the behavior from the right that we abhor. And a reader left this frighteningly Orwellian remark. No, it's appropriate to shame and remove from public discourse those who repeat lies that hurt people, such as lies about scientific information about COVID that kills. Because as we have seen, misinformation does kill. No, I do not want to hear the alternative truths in the name of free speech. It is destroying society, free speech. Especially when the undereducated,
That's the key.
Yeah.
I'm smarter than you, so you're not going to hear this.
You're not part of the elite. So I have to screen what you hear. Are lauded by so many, especially when the undereducated are lauded by so many. You shouldn't praise the undereducated. And propaganda abounds that people cannot discern the difference between fact and fiction. We must set some boundaries for when public figures lie to the detriment of the public. They must be held accountable. I'm not sure how we do it, but I know we must. Yeah. So this idea, the underlying what the lefties are saying there, goes back to this paper that I was reading the other day that I'm going to keep coming back to. It's a long paper, but there's so much good stuff in here. It's called the Frankfurt School and Cultural Marxism. And one of the sections in there deals with a guy named Herbert Marcuse. Let's take a short break, and I'll see if I can find Herbert Marcuse somewhere.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Attention tailgaters. It's time for you to get a new tail to gate on. It's a fact. They got a 2021 model clearance going on all kinds of your favorite Nissan models, the Rogue Sport, Kicks, Murano, Titan, and they've all got great FM radios so that you can pick up tall tales in the afternoon. 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on Nissan. Zero down Magic tailgaters. Learn more by visiting NissanGuam.com.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
You know, one of these days, maybe I'll change that little promo there that occurs in the break. I'd like to see myself seen as the single voice of reason, but, you know, I'm so humble. You know that, Jose.
Every day.
Yeah, and so proud of my humility. But there are many voices of reason that reside right here in Tailgater Nation. A lot of tailgaters are very reasonable, and they share their reasons, opinions, comments, and thoughts with us on both Facebook and on the phone. So, tailgaters, 671-888-8255. We welcome your comments, thoughts, and musings. Okay, I was talking about Herbert Marcuse. Herbert Marcuse was one of the guys in the Frankfurt School back in 1922. Moved to Columbia with the rest of them in 1933. All the rest of them except Herb went back to Frankfurt after the war was over. Herbert stayed at Columbia and became one of the gurus of the uber left at that time. And lefties at the time used to chant, Mao, Marx, as you were, Marx, Mao, Marcuse, Marx, Mao, Marcuse. And one of the things that Marcuse said that the left had to develop was repressive tolerance, that freedom of speech would be available to anyone who was capable and willing to spout the Marxist line, complete freedom of speech. But those who countered the Marxist line must be repressed. Repressive tolerance.
So he's also the father of fascism.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we saw in some of those comments, and especially the last one, repressive tolerance. Okay, now we've talked about newspapers, about politics, about philosophies, political philosophies, journalism, journalistic philosophies. And I think Weber really laid it out. Interesting that his editorial ran in the very newspaper that he was actually talking about, because the Post doesn't run any editorials anymore. The way not to trigger anybody is to impose your own gag rule. That way you'll be safe all the time. But the Daily News, most of the time, has what I would label nice editorials, feel-good editorials. If you can't say something nice to brighten up the day, then, well, you know, run something from the USA Today. Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of like you look at the editorial page to find out who the editorial page editor is, and the guy's name is Mr. Rogers. It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood here in the Daily News.
That's a lovely cardigan you're wearing, Bob. Is that red?
Yeah. Today is Red Shirt Monday, after all, but I'll get to that when we get to systemic racism. All right, so here's the Daily News' hard-hitting, scathing, tell it like it is editorial. Our view: students should explore internships, start building foundations for success. With summer break and events making their way onto our calendars and lists of things to plan for, the Daily News has been receiving and sharing announcements from various businesses, organizations, and schools about internship programs. And as the global workplace and conventional employment avenues continue to evolve, we highly encourage all Guam students to explore the opportunities that internships have to offer. Intern programs provide valuable hands-on experience that can help students connect classroom lessons with real-world work in fields of interest. According to the National Association of Colleges and Employers Journal, recent studies have indicated that students graduating with internship experience are more likely than students without those experiences to find employment upon graduation. I just got to stop here and put my own 2 cents worth in, you know. You know, when I was going to high school, I had some internship experiences. I interned at King and Morgan drugstore, and where I was paid the princely sum of 55 cents an hour and spent most of my time as a soda jerk. Most people would say, I mean, our international radio audience listeners would say, Bob, you didn't need an internship to be a jerk. You got that for nothing. But drugstores back in the day all had soda fountains, banana splits, ice cream cones, malted milk, sundaes, etc. And the soda jerk was the guy who was behind that counter fixing up these things and selling them. If you ever saw It's a Wonderful Life, you'll remember that the kid in It's a Wonderful Life, young George Bailey, was a soda jerk. You remember how the 2 girls came in every day just to flirt with him? Well, that's another story.
That's what you aspired. You're waiting for that scene.
Yeah. Anyhow, and I interned at Phil's Shell Station, where I was a pump jockey back in the days. If you touched the gas pump, somebody would cut your hand off. Those were the kind of internships I had. Did I learn a lot? Yeah. Did I become a pharmacist? No. Did I drill an oil well? No. Did I learn what having a job and working really is all about? You damn betcha. I certainly did. But what do I know? You know, we didn't have internships like this then where you could pander to the kids. Beyond setting sights on graduation, employment, and future salaries, internships can provide students with valuable experience they need to make decisions about their educational paths. Because what seems fascinating in an introductory college course does not necessarily translate to a fascinating, fulfilling career like being a talk radio host. I don't know where you could intern for that. You could come in here, I guess, empty the wastebasket every day. What do you think, Jose?
Sounds like a deal, but it have to be an op-ed first.
Yeah, exactly. And conversely, what may seem like a difficult career could actually turn out to be exciting once a student has been immersed in real firsthand experience. When he's immersed in firsthand experience, I'm thinking about some kind of abdominal surgery.
From the top of your head, Bob,
Sir.
can you have a number of how many different careers you've had or different kinds of jobs you had in your lifetime?
From the top of my head?
I know that's a tall order.
Yeah, that's a higher thought process. Probably 25, I'd say. Yeah.
Did you have any internships in your youth for any of those 25?
Not a one.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you had...
I used to listen to the radio a lot. But we'll go on.
My point is that you had these quote-unquote internships that you described not to teach you about these different various careers, but to give you a skill set and a toolbox so that you can succeed in any career.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is missing.
To know what having a job is all about. Oh, another internship I had when I was 12, detasseling hybrid seed corn. It's a little complicated, but the way you the way you interbreed corn is you have 2 rows that have tassels. They're called the bull rows, and then 6 rows that are the female rows, so they don't self-pollinate. Kids have to go out and pull those tassels out. That way the bull row pollinates the female row. And that internship started at 5:30 a.m. at the park, where a truck would come in and pick up literally a truckload of kids. If you tried to do that today, they'd lock you up so tight they'd pipe sunlight to you. And then they'd take us out to the fields. When we got to the fields, we'd be out there until dark. 12, 13, 14 years old, pulling those tassels, rain, extremely uncomfortable, extremely hard work. But where I grew up, it was a rite of passage. If you didn't work at Simon's in the summertime, the thought was, doesn't quite match up.
So what you learned there was discipline.
Discipline. Mm-hmm. The fact that because something's hard doesn't mean you really need to quit. The harder it is, the more important that you not quit. Yeah, that was of course, we were so backward back in the 50s. We didn't know what the heck we were doing. Here we go here, finishing this thing up. We encourage all students to find out more about the internship opportunities available in our community. Those who are interested in the Chamorro culture and historic preservation can explore the paid internship program with Guam Preservation Trust. If math and science pique your curiosity and you're a high school sophomore or junior, check out the University of Guam STEM High School Summer Internship Program. Read, research, and apply. Internships are a good ways to learn more about future careers. More importantly, internships are a great way, oh, this is wonderful, are a great way to learn about yourself.
Like maybe I wasn't really that interested in that. Conversely, I would say if you're going to go this route, pick something that you have no idea or interest in and learn about it.
Exactly.
Because everybody, before they get to college now, they already have to have their major and they already have their path.
Yeah.
And how many times did I see my friends, myself including, change their major their freshman year?
Yeah.
Some stick with the path, but I say explore.
I think that's a good way to go through life, to kind of explore. I've got some advice here that I'm going to pass along, going back to the cancel culture. I think it's really important that you choose your words carefully so that you could, if you have an idea, you could get it across without being canceled. Now, here's a sample. We have the ability to see what can be unburdened by what has been and then to make the possible actually happen. Do you agree with that, Jose? Or it is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. And then we must together work together to see where we are, where we're headed, where we're going, and our vision for where we should be. But also see it as a moment to, together address challenges and to work on the opportunities that are presented by this moment. That's how to avoid cancel culture. Make noise with your mouth, right? Now, I'd like to take credit for being the author of these anti-cancel culture little snippets, but I didn't write these. You know for sure Andrew didn't write them. You know who wrote them? The Vice President of the United States of America. Yeah. We must together work together to see where we are, where we are headed, where we are going, and our vision for where we should be. But also see it as a moment to, yes, together address the challenges and to work on the opportunities that are presented by this moment. I felt like I should be holding my hand over my heart or bowing my head as I read that. Man, our vice president has really got away with words, doesn't she?
Instead, you're covering your mouth as you were gagging. I think she has this teleprompter in her head of just platitudes and words that go nowhere.
Yeah.
And it puts it together, and she says it, and actually walks away proud.
That she has really knocked it out of the park, and all it is word salad. I don't think she learned that from Willie Brown.
No comment.
Okay, looks like I got somebody in the green room here, probably Kamala, wanting to talk about her speeches. Lack of motivation in today's generation. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll come back to a caller. If you miss it the first time, he'll repeat.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla.
Okay, here we go. Repeat wants to talk about the lack of motivation in today's generation. Let's hear it, Pete.
Hey, Uncle Bob. Hey, Real Joe. So last time that we spoke, I had mentioned about the folks that didn't want jobs. And I got additional, points to make on that. So just from personal experience, right? When I was 12 years old, I started working under the table at a local mom and pop store because my mom had gotten hooked on drugs and nobody was there to help my little brother and sister. And so I had to work for $1 an hour so that I could buy milk and whatever we could eat so that my little brother and sister can eat. And by the time I was 14, I had a paper route. I was mowing lawns and so on and so forth to make some extra money so that I could help my family. Well, today, or not today, but nowadays, I hire a kid to come and mow my lawn. I have over an acre of land, to come and mow my lawn for $100 on one weekend. And so I said, you know what? Let me check my little nephews and nieces if any of them would rather do it instead of me hiring it out to a stranger or someone who's not related. So I put out all the family chats, and mind you, there's dozens and dozens of people on my multiple family chats. Do you know how many people took up the opportunity, Uncle Bob?
Yeah. None.
0.
Yeah.
Crickets. And so I just thanks, Real Joe. But I'm just floored at the lack of motivation of this young generation.
Yeah,
that's all I wanted to impart today.
Yeah, well, do you want to give us your opinion of why that is, Pete?
Well, we have the Kamala Harrises and the Joe Bidens and the Jim Moylans who want to just give everybody everything for free.
That's certainly a part of it, isn't it?
I think so.
And going back to my own experience, you know, there used to be, for want of a better way of saying it, the idea that work was something that should be sought after. That you didn't have to tell a kid when school was out, it was summertime, hey kid, it's time to go looking for a job. Kids just kind of knew that. And there wasn't a whole lot of rebellion against it. Not everybody, but most kids found something to work on during the summer, try to make a buck or two. I don't see that nowadays. It's so much easier to stand around the corner with a sign that says, please help me buy a new pair of shoes. My kids are almost half worn out.
Or like I said earlier, or last time, bank of mom and dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, I always come back to Mark Twain for wisdom, and in situations like this, repeat. One of Mark Twain's famous sayings was that youth is such a wonderful thing. It's a pity that it's wasted on the young.
Absolutely.
Okay, good
All
talking
right.
to you, Repeat.
Thanks for the time.
You betcha. Yeah, that's Repeat. Okay, so let's see what we got on the card for today. Remember, today is Red Shirt Monday. That means today is Hope Cristobal's screen test. If you've never seen it before, you're in for a treat. So this is what I got on the card. I've got systemic racism, and in honor of systemic racism, everybody out there who's looking at Facebook today can see that the platter of rice that I'm holding up is not orange. It's red.
Nope.
And you can also see that I'm wearing my red shirt today. I would never wear anything but a red shirt on. I would never wear anything but a red shirt anyhow, but certainly not on Red Shirt Monday. And if you want to argue with me about what color the rice is or what color my shirt is, then we're back to those editorials about cancel culture.
I will yell at you.
You will be canceled. You will be shamed. You will be embarrassed. You will know that you must stick with the agenda. Beep, beep. Yeah. All right. So that's how we started out. I've got Public Law 36-34 dishonor roll. GPD, Guam Police Department, and Steve Ignacio versus the Get-Go. Go! Then I've got John Fernandez versus the Kids. Paul Frankus versus Tim Uggan. The Grievant versus Nate Berg. GWA versus Cortec. Hunter Biden versus the White House. And Paul Gottfried versus conservative journalism. So I don't think I need to say much more about systemic racism. I think everybody kind of gets the idea that the orange is the truth, the red is the narrative. And nowadays, the narrative controls over what the truth is or what the facts are, unless the one who comes forward and tells you what the facts are wants to be canceled. Well, I want to be canceled. I'm not going to sign up for the narrative.
Or until the New York Times authenticates it.
Exactly. Yeah, so I'm going to come forward here every day at 1600, and to the extent that I'm able to, I will tell you the facts and the truth, interspersed with a little bit of sarcasm, no doubt. Let's head for the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Chemical leak in Ukraine. I'm Laura Cantor, Fox News. Ukrainian city Sumy reporting an ammonia leak at a chemical plant in the eastern part of the city, where Russian forces have been regularly shelling. Ukrainian authorities refusing to surrender the port city of Mariupol to Russia. The Russian invasion of Ukraine causing residents to endure much suffering.
The UN is reporting residents in Mariupol and Sumy are now facing potentially fatal shortages of food, water, and medicine. Stockpiles of UN aid are getting across the border to teams embedded within Ukraine, but aid workers there are struggling mightily to reach those displaced.
Fox's Aisha Hazy in Puszymuszl, Poland. The United Nations confirming over 900 civilians have been killed, but say the real number is likely higher. As Russia continues its attack on Ukraine, President Biden will visit Poland during his trip to Europe this week to meet with NATO leaders.
The president is back here at the White House. He was spending his weekend in Delaware. And obviously, there's going to be a big focus on what the president will say when he goes overseas this week for what could be the most important foreign trip he's had since taking office. Press Secretary Jen Psaki did put out a tweet writing the trip will be focused on continuing to rally the world in support of the Ukrainian people and against President Putin's invasion of Ukraine.
Fox's Mark Meredith at the White House. Confirmation hearings starting Monday for President Biden's Supreme Court pick, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Fox's Gernal Scott has the details.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says he's had a one-on-one discussion with Judge Jackson, despite how he says Democrats have treated nominees Republican presidents have put forward. He said on CBS Face the Nation he expects a cordial process.
It'll be a respectful, deep dive into her record, which I think is entirely appropriate for a lifetime appointment.
America is listening to Fox News.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. More services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
We're already Pika's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
The Biden administration says it will consider more drilling for oil and gas on federal lands.
Still really a lot of pain at the pumps, especially out west in states like California, where prices continue to climb. The national average just this morning, according to AAA, is $4.25 a gallon. The White House will now resume plans to drill on federal lands. It's part of the federal oil and gas leasing program, and it's happening following a court ruling that restored the ability to factor global warming into decision-making. Now, last month, a federal judge in Louisiana blocked the Biden administration from using the social cost of carbon to include in that math to factor risks of climate change into decision-making on permits. But now the White House can use it.
Fox's David Spunt. Harvard University shutting down a police station inside a residence hall due to growing criticism.
The university police substation at Mather House was closed in February. Many students saying it created an intimidating environment, calling it a violent visual intimidation tactic. One resident saying police are not present to keep her actively safe. Another adding having a police car outside every night doesn't bring a sense of safety. A third resident going a step further, saying for real justice on campus, university police must be abolished. Police sometimes ate alongside students in the dining hall, making some students feel uncomfortable. Harvard University police say the closure was a result of staff and student concerns and a lack of use of the substation. Ann Carrick, Fox News.
NASCAR Cup driver William Byron winning at Atlanta Motor Speedway Sunday.
There's going to be a massive run coming off this one car four. Byron top to bottom, hugs that white line, drifts up and comes to the line. He wins it as Buscher, Haley have a hard crash into the wall.
Fox Sports with the final call. I'm Laura Cantor, and this is Fox News.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Hey, what did the grilled cheese sandwich say to their date?
What'd they say?
You make me melt.
Oh, so cheesy.
But not as cheesy as Subway's latest Eat Fresh, Refresh menu innovation. The new Fresh Melts with 3 times the cheese. Fresh Melts are the cheese lover's holy grail. Fresh Melts combine freshly baked breads and your favorite meats topped with a triple load of cheese. All grilled to warm, toasty perfection. Try the ham and cheese melt, tuna melt, or steak and cheese melt to start. Best of all, you can make any footlong into a fresh melt. At Subway, eat fresh.
Returning from that big halftime show that just keeps getting better and better every day. I really groove on that big halftime show. If for no other reason, I'd listen to this show just to hear the halftime show. So now it's that time of the week on Red Shirt Monday when we go to Hope Cristobal's screen test. I'm trying to find an agent for Hope in Hollywood to see if she couldn't land some kind of an acting job, given her ability to deliver her lines, as you'll see in a minute. But by way of background, Hope is a very prominent member of the separatist community. Now, when you hear people talk about Chamorro self-determination, what they really mean is an independent Guam. As I've gone through it so many times that the only alternative that they're pushing right now, they're pushing three: so free association, statehood, and independence. Two of those three are just non-starters, leaving nothing but independence. So then very cleverly designed propaganda, such as this one that was an insert in the Daily News on January 6th, as were December 6th, they take every opportunity to get your mindset in such a manner that you might favor an independent Guam as opposed to Guam remaining part of the independent as you were part of the American family. Hope is one of the prime movers of that group. She is the chairperson of the Chamorro Language Commission. So she, Robert Underwood, Michael Bavacqua, Laura Sauder, I would say, are the prime movers here behind the Chamorro separatist movement. And then there are a lot of other folks that Lenin would refer to as useful idiots that see some kind of a demonstration going on, think, well, I can do that, you know. I'm Chamorro. I think I'll try that one myself. So just remember that Hope is the face and voice of the Chamorro separatist movement, that if Hope could write the book, the beginning of it would be, once upon a time, the island of Guam became independent. So with no further ado, here's Hope.
You're nothing but a white colonizer. That's who you are. Colonization is the same thing as slow murder. You're a murderer. That's who you are. Get off my island.
Sir, you need to go. You can't be policing people here and telling people how to protest or what to protest for. You need to go. You need to go. I'm against this. That's cool, but you cannot be policing people and telling them how to protest and what to advocate for. She has a right to go.
I'm an indigenous Chamorro. I have more rights here than you are. You came here because of the structures of colonialism, asshole. Tayo mamalaw, sige, Judy, Tano. Titaw-taw-tano, how? Waho bini taw-taw-tano. Waho bini malahoga. Waho na short na kayo bini. Hago taza na short mo bini. What's on you? You need to leave.
You need to go.
Please.
You need to get out of here.
Please pause this.
Get out of here.
Please, this is not your
When I get a chance, go.
Please. Thank you. Thank you, pause this. Please leave. No, you think what?
What happened, man?
Well, he confronted me.
What did he say?
Telling me I shouldn't be here. I support Black Lives Matter. It's part of the colonialistic systemic racism. And I came here to support these people. He's a white man that has come here. And he continues the legacy of colonialism. He continues to fight people, individuals, my goodness. I'm a former senator. I authored the Commission on Decolonization.
We're proud of you, Auntie. We're proud of you. He's safe.
Well, there you have it. So can you imagine what it would be like to live in an independent Guam with leadership like that? How pleasant it would be? So that's the face and the voice of the separatist movement. And of all of those who favor that approach, you know how many have come forward to say, that's not us, we repudiate? None. No one has come forward. So, you know, there's a kind of an adoption by silence. She does speak for that group.
It's just hearsay, but someone told me she did apply for Yale.
Yeah. Yeah. And they asked her what she was going to major in. She said yelling. Yeah. And then you saw the young man there saying, you need to leave, you need to leave. I mentioned useful idiots. That's a classic example. And unfortunately, there are too many of them. This is not something that we can afford to brush off. This is serious. This is critical race theory brought to our shores in the name of Chamorro separatism. And all of the tools that CRT uses, they use, including what you just saw on the screen here. And I didn't mention, you know, the fundamental theorist of the separatist movement, Robert Underwood, who told us in his newspaper column a few weeks ago that he has been teaching critical race theory since 1972. So there you are. You know, I mean, if that's what you think the appropriate way for the island to go is for independence, I'd urge you to make sure you tune in every Monday right after the halftime show to refresh your recollection. Bring your friends, pass out the popcorn. I think everybody needs to see Hope Cristobal's screen test. And I suspect that there will not be any Hollywood roles for Hope. They don't make that kind of horror movie anymore. All right, so much for Hope Cristobal, the screen test, the separatist movement. I don't have anything directly on the separatist movement today, but I will keep bringing it back because it is not going to go away. It has become and will become a much more serious problem as time goes on. Next item on the card is the GPD, Guam Police Department, versus the get-go. Now, I have to explain the vocabulary here a little bit. Perhaps you would remember when 4 drunken females, including a police officer, decided that they would turn Jerry Kitchen into a drive-in restaurant. And they plowed right into the front of Jerry Kitchen restaurant. Police officer on the scene didn't think it was necessary to do a field sobriety. I think he wrote him up for overtime parking or something like that.
Just a scratch.
Yeah, just a scratch. One of the classic, move along, there's nothing to see here. But because of a public outcry, the Attorney General's office did an investigation, wrote up the driver for drunken driving, and I suspect there are plenty of other things that didn't get touched, but that's neither here nor there. It so clearly looked like a cover-up because these people were driving north on Marine Corps Drive, attempted to turn left on a Hospital Road, overshot the intersection, turned over the median in the center of the road, drove over that, across the next lane, up over the curb, into the parking lot, smashing into the show windows of Jerry Kitchen and driving all the way to the back wall. And when the car finally came to rest, the driver tried to back it out and drive away. It was too smashed up to do that. So, you know, everybody, and there was no field sobriety test, a minor citation, et cetera. And I think everybody who read the papers had any knowledge of it say, boy, does this look like a cover-up? And here's what our chief of police said in light of those comments. He said, I have no information, even from the get-go, that there was a cover-up in this crash.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So a very masterful use of vocabulary, get-go. So we've adapted get-go into tall tales speech. We don't ever start at the beginning. The show begins at the get-go, which is about 6 minutes after 4. And if you stop and analyze what he said, it's self-incriminating. I have no information, even from the get-go, that there was a cover-up in the crash. In other words, I didn't know there was a cover-up at the beginning. It took a little while for them to pull me into it, is basically what he's saying. So that's our chief of police. There's a story that ran in the Post today. No legitimate reason. GPD meets victim after failing to investigate her complaint. The Guam Police Department, right off the bat, this is not how you write a story. I don't know anybody named Guam Police. Have you ever met anybody named Guam Police Department?
No, but Jolene Toves has.
Yeah. The Guam Police Department is owning up to one officer's mishandling of a case involving the alleged sexual harassment of a patient by a Guam doctor in 2020, which allowed the case to fall through the cracks. On Tuesday, the alleged victim met privately with GPD officers. The victim waited 2 years to find out the status of the investigation. But the investigation never went beyond the victim filing her complaint. Or, in tall tale speak, the investigation never went beyond the
get-go.
Exactly. There is no legitimate reason why the victim in this case had fallen through without a thorough investigation for the time to have lapsed that she could find closure. Did Kamala Harris write that sentence?
All the way from Poland.
Yeah. There may be many reasons why it could have gone that way, but those reasons will always, to a victim, not be good enough. Officer Berlin Savella, spokesperson for GPD, told the Post. Okay, I got to stop here again. This is not a job for a spokesperson. Spokespersons don't confess and repent. It could have been the officer that dropped the ball. In fact, it should have been the officer that dropped the ball. And it should have been Chief Steve Ignacio. It's not the police department. He's the chief. And when you're the chief, everything that happens that shouldn't and everything that doesn't happen that should, that's you. That's not some subordinate. That's not, let me see who I can blame for this, etc. You're the boss from the get-go to the finish. After identifying the victim's case and where it was, GPE investigators and officers from Internal Affairs Section and an advocate with the Domestic Assault Response Team reached out. Oh, that makes it better. They reached out to the victim. What do you think? Flowers, Jose?
I hope there was dinner.
A really nice car. What did they have to eat?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Crow.
They reached out to the victim to provide support and services as a victim of a crime. During the meeting, Savella said the victim's frustration in being let down by those who she turned to for help. I was afforded the opportunity to meet with the victim, and as traumatized or frustrated as she was, I felt the frustration. I felt her pain. How did Bill Clinton get into this? And I felt her concern as not only a police officer who tries to provide services for those who seek assistance, but as a woman, a mother, and having come across many victims in my tenure with this department, Savella said. So is this about the victim and the guy that dropped the ball, or is it about Savella?
It's the new GPD empath.
Uh-huh. Several protocols and procedures appeared not to have been followed from the moment the victim set foot in the Tumon precinct in March 2020 to file her complaint with the officer. When he took my interview, he did not bring me to a room. He took my complaint right there in the front hallway while other officers were walking in. He didn't bring me to a place of privacy. This was a sexual complaint. He didn't give me the decency to have a place where it's private, the alleged victim said. After she told the officer the allegations and what transpired, she said when it came time to put it on paper, the officer instructed her not to include everything.
Because he wasn't going to.
I have no information, even from the get-go, that there was a cover-up in this investigation, said Steve Ignacio. He told me, he told me not to write all the information down. He said it was too much. I asked him, "You're suggesting that I don't write it all down?" And he said, "Yes," the victim told the Post. She followed up with GPD after the filing the complaint. The officer indicated he would reach out to her with an update. I think they ought to give up on this update stuff. Use the phone or email or WhatsApp or a text or something. But the update never came despite contacting GPD at least 5 times. It wasn't until this year that she learned the officer who took her complaint is no longer with GPD. Her case was never investigated, and it was not classified properly. It's never easy for one to have to say, "I'm sorry that this was not done to the best that you believe it could have been done." We do not have an answer as to why the officer who initiated or assisted the victim responded in a manner where the case was not classified properly, or even sought a senior officer's advice as to how the case could have been handled, Savella said. GPD's Internal Affairs section opened administrative investigation of the incident March 9. Now it is in the fact-finding stage. Despite the officer no longer being employed by GPD, the department is investigating what happened, who was involved, and their roles in the incident. GPD has 90 days to make a statement on the administrative review, but there's nothing further GPD can do for the victim, as a statute of limitations to investigate misdemeanor harassment or reclassify it to a 4th-degree criminal sexual conduct complaint has run its course.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter who delayed it. It's just off the books now.
It is. Now, a clever prosecutor might go back through this and pour through all the records and say this was not inadvertence, forgetfulness, excusable neglect. This was criminal conduct, and prosecute the cop.
Right.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm not saying it's probable or anything else. Yeah, but that's it. So I've mentioned this before. That a police officer, a guy in uniform wearing a badge on duty, is one of the most powerful people in our society. He has more power than the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He can find you walking down the street, slap cuffs on you, fill out some papers, turn the papers in, take you out to DEPCOR, and you could be in detention until you appear before a magistrate on Monday morning, even though you haven't done anything wrong. He has that much power. Now, if he does that, he's going to be in trouble, but he has that much power just by filling out some papers and taking you to jail. And you can see from here, just as he can cause you to go to jail, he can keep you out of jail. Just this simple transaction here showed that maybe somebody got a break. Maybe the cop knew somebody, and the criminal here caught a break and is going to walk away scot-free. And then the new spokesman for GPD is going to take all the blame for it. I'm so impressed at her courage.
Is this person going to take the blame as a woman, a mother, having come across many victims, or as an officer?
No, probably as a woman. Yeah. This is just, there's just nothing to like about this whole story. Ordinarily, Jose, as Catholics, we see the benefit of owning up to your sins, to the things you've done wrong. And we see the benefit in confessing and repenting. There's no repentance here. There's just a lot of self-serving.
It's a lot of shoulder shrugging.
Shoulder shrugging and virtue signaling on the part of someone who really does not have any an oar in the water at all. Someone who should just report the facts and should set up the chief to make the apologies, since the other guy is gone. Extremely bad. Now, this is fodder for a real editorial. Out there in the Daily News editorial boardroom, if you can put away your copies of A Wonderful Life and Time in the Neighborhood, maybe you could give it a shot. Okay, it's time for a trip to Wrigley Field in Chicago.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Attention tailgaters. It's time for you to get a new tail to gate on. It's a fact. They got a 2021 model clearance going on all kinds of your favorite Nissan models, the Rogue Sport, Kicks, Murano, Titan, and they've all got great FM radios so that you can pick up tall tails in the afternoon. 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on Nissan. Zero down magic tailgaters. Learn more by visiting NissanGuam.com.
Okay, here we go. Wrigley Field in Chicago, 7th inning stretch. That means 2 more innings to go till the final out. Next item on the card is John Fernandez versus the Kids. An article that ran in the Post, the title of which is Waiver on COVID-19 Public School Closures Awaits Action. Got to clean up the vocabulary here again. We're not talking about a waiver. A waiver is where there is a requirement that is in place and remains in place, and for one reason or another, one with the power to not enforce the requirement waives the requirement. It is not an abolition of the requirement, even a temporary abolition of the requirement. People who try to enlist in the military sometimes come up against roadblocks where there's a rule against someone with certain physical conditions or even criminal records. And under the right circumstances, there can be a waiver of that requirement. It doesn't mean that the requirement is repealed. It means there's a waiver. So the word waiver is misused, and you'll see that it leads to a really fuzzy thought process on the part of this reporter and on the part of the school officials. Here's how it goes. It looks like Department of Education will be granted relief from meeting instructional requirements for this year. Department of Ed saw 2 requests from the 36th Guam legislature. One seeks to waive service learning hours requirements for graduation.
Wrong.
Yeah. The second request is for exemption, better, from the 180 instructional day mandated due to COVID-19 disruptions to the school year. In total, 24 school days were missed, but the requests took into account the uncertainty of the pandemic and school closures that may arise as a result. The Department of Ed is seeking reprieve for previously missed days. Reprieve. Boy, do they have any dictionaries over there at the Post?
They have a thesaurus.
When you do something wrong, you get a reprieve. If you have a criminal sentence, you might get a reprieve. Department of Ed is seeking reprieve for previously missed days and any future days missed during the remainder of the school year. An advanced waiver. DOE requested that service learning hours be waived for graduating seniors in light of the challenges. You ought to just junk the whole service learning thing anyhow. It's a classic left-wing boondoggle at best. In light of the challenges the Wuhan virus pandemic presented for students in connecting with I'm going to skip over this service learning thing. DOE officials have been waiting for word on requests from Senator Talina Nelson, Committee on Education chairwoman. At this time, the Committee on Education has drafted legislation to waive both 180 instructional days and service learning requirements for DOE public school students, said Kaylin Mano, policy analyst for Nelson. He isn't any better at it than the people at DOE. With only 2 months left in the school year, time is running short, but it appears that DOE will have to wait little longer as circumstances are out of the senator's hands. Well, actually, they're not. You know, here's a little kind of a mind game. You know, it was said in law school, they will tell you that no matter what is before him, a judge cannot not decide. If there is a question before you and you don't decide it,
he can't waive.
He can't waive. If there's a question, plaintiff and defendant file a motion, the judge doesn't make a decision on the motion, then the non-moving party wins. A judge cannot not decide. And it's the same way here. It appears the DOE will have to wait a little longer as circumstances are out of the senator's hands. Guys, until there is a law, until there's a change in the law, you got to make up the days. Don't be dancing around with it, waiting for Senator Nelson. Senator Nelson is still on military leave, and our office will not be able to introduce the bills until her return to her senatorial capacity, Mano said. However, we look forward to working with Senator Nelson and the legislature to address our requests. I think it will be helpful to pass something before the end of the school year, Fernandez said. That's why the title here is Fernandez versus the kids. Fernandez is the superintendent of education. He is not the superintendent of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. It's not his job to say have the kids say, wow, Mr. Fernandez is really nice. We don't have to do this. Mr. Fernandez is supposed to be the adult in the room. And if a day in school has any value, then it has just as much value after the end of the ordinary school year, as it has during the school year. And if it has no value, then you don't need to erase the 24 days. You need to erase the whole thing, because we start out with a proposition that a kid benefits by a day in school. So, John Fernandez, you should be doing everything you can to make sure the kids get that 180 days in school. Now, the first thing that's going to come out of your mouth is, well, the board. And my question to you is, when the board started discussing this matter, what did they say when you pounded on the table, stood up, and said, I am not going to be a party out of cheating the kids out of 24 days of that which they have an absolute right to. Count me out of that. Let's make up those days. Let's do it the best way we can. But we're not going to shortchange these kids. That's what he should have been saying. He's the superintendent. If he doesn't stick up for the kids, then who's going to, other than me and Ray? Ray went through the same thing this morning. A tag team, the Bob and Ray tag team. Yeah. So instead of doing that, which is his job, he says, we look forward to working with Senator Nelson and the legislature to address our requests. I think it will be helpful to pass something before the end of the school year. How about, I think it would be really necessary to not pass a damn thing before the end of the school year. The legislation must be passed by the legislature to formally, here we go, see what I mean? Waive. Which is more serious, a waiver or repealing and reenacting the law? The legislation must be passed by the legislature to formally waive the statutory mandates on the public school system. The first request for waiver to requirements of adequate the Education Act was granted in school year 2019-2020, following the onset of the Wuhan virus pandemic. In school year 2020-2021, an extension to that waiver was granted. This is the third time DOE has requested the waiver. In the discussion of the latest waiver request, senators questioned DOE's learning, recovery, and educational plans for the next year. It was noted that they didn't want waivers to be the go-to remedy in meeting the adequate education requirements in the future, just because they did it 3 years in a row.
Well, maybe that's why they're looking for a reprieve. They did something wrong.
They did something. They really have. You know, and it's disappointing to read 2 stories in a row where there's no good guy, good person, where there's no good guy in the whole thing. Everybody here stinks, right? Senator Nelson should have put her foot down before she went on military leave. And she should have said the words I put in John Fernandez's mouth. Forget it. I'm not going to cheat those kids out of 24 days of school. Get up off your knees. I ain't going to do it.
I'm going to milk something that I've been repeating since March 2020.
All right.
Since there is a sole executive authority health emergency with someone who says they make all the decisions in the government,
right.
No wonder no one's taking accountability for anything. They don't need to.
Because it's all in her shop. Yeah.
And they're going to say that's not pertinent to this. That has nothing to do with one thing or the other. And I said, no, it's the tone that's set here on the island.
Exactly. Yeah. A good point, Jose. No one has to take responsibility because there's this emergency, and the governor will do everything that needs to be done.
It seems like everyone wants to just shrug the past 2 years.
Yeah. Let it go, including the archdiocese. Oh, we can't have Mass? Oh, all right, we won't have Mass then. We can't celebrate sacraments?
We're not the ones making the requirements.
Yeah, we'll let it go. Okay, next on the calendar, I've got Paul Frankus versus Tim Uggan. At least there's a good guy in this story. And it's entitled Letter, Extreme Displeasure and Outright Disgust with State of Guam Veteran Cemetery. Okay, I suppose a little full disclosure here. Yeah, I've been here, it'll be 60 years next year. I don't ever want to leave. I want to stay here until it's time to be planted in the Guam Veteran Cemetery. There's no rush there. Take your time. But I hope that it's not as this title in this article says, disgust. So here's what Paul says. Maybe we should go to Churchill Downs, and I'll take this down the home stretch.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options, options, options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla. We're already Pica's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
Okay, here we go into the home stretch from Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. Paul Francis versus Tim Uggan. Paul says, I'm writing to express my extreme displeasure and outright disgust at the status of the maintenance of the crypt areas of Guam Veterans Cemetery. I am absolutely amazed at the status of disrepair and neglect I have witnessed, not just on my current visit to Guam, but whenever I have visited the cemetery in the past. My father was recently interred in a crypt, and my grandfather has been buried there for several years. How can whoever is in charge, that's where Tim Uggan comes in, not see the unsatisfactory condition of the entire crypt complex? Do you not conduct regular inspections? Do you not get reports from your maintenance staff and groundskeepers? Has no one on staff or at the director's level ever taken a tour of your facility to ensure the veterans buried there are properly honored with an adequately maintained facility? And if someone does inspect, do you think the current condition of the crypt complex is permissible, acceptable, honorable? Let me illuminate you regarding some of the disgraceful aspects of our cemetery. In my father's section facing Route 1, the uncut grass is a foot tall. I discovered an unused crypt whose seal is actually broken. In that same location, a broken concrete bench was simply pushed into the grass adjacent to where it once stood. Well, the grass is a foot tall. What the heck? There are mold stains everywhere. There are even stains from flowers and various other items left by visiting families. All these conditions have clearly existed for months, if not years. And no one knows of this? No one has seen fit to implement a plan to repair damage and restore the crypt complex to a condition worthy of those honored there? Your people can't even take time to wash away the pencil marks once they've centered the memorial placard on a crypt. How lazy, how disrespectful must you be to do that? I got Daily News ought to hire this guy to work in their editorial shop. Any explanation you choose to offer is unacceptable in its totality, but please try. Please try to explain yourselves. I almost beg you to attempt to justify your negligence, disrespect, incapability to properly honor our deceased military. Well, it's a sad story for sure. Sad story from the get-go. But I'm afraid it's all too typical. I keep talking about the shoulder on the road up in Jigo and how horrible it looks most of the time. And I'm looking for something here, yeah. And but that's bad. But it's not like a cemetery. A cemetery's got to look good, no matter what else. You got to take care of your cemetery. You notice the Navy Cemetery downtown at the junction of Route 8 and Marine Corps Drive, there isn't even a fence there. And it's always neat as a pin. How does that happen? Are dead Navy people easier to take care of? Well, of course, there's some Navy people down at the Veteran Cemetery, too. This is really disappointing. And I noticed this. In the government of Guam, a director's job is to either solve problems or have really good excuses as to why he didn't solve problems. An alibi, if you were, right? Well, I know it's not good, but I don't have the budget to hire the necessary people. I know it's not good, but we can't get the right supplies. I know it's not good, but we are so busy taking care of other things. None of those things matter. And it comes back again to John Fernandez going before the board, pounding the table and saying, no, we can't do this. We're not going to cheat the kids out of 24 days of education. And if it's the legislature, Mr. Ogden knows exactly how much he needs to take care of that cemetery. He better. That's his job. And if he doesn't get it, he pounds the table and he says, you got to give me that. And he goes into all of his reasons. And if he gets canceled, he gets canceled. But he doesn't go silently into the night and leave it to a guy like Paul Francis to do his job for him. Now, here's the frosting on this particular case, all right? For that kind of leadership at the Guam Veterans Affairs Office that takes care of the cemetery, you know what kind of a bargain we're getting, Jose? We're only shelling out $128,788 for Mr. Tim Ogden. It's no wonder he can't take care of. He probably has no incentive to work with a salary like that. Yeah, and the other. Wait a minute, that's a really good salary.
That's incredible.
He makes $93 in salary and $128,788 in benefits. It's all in the staffing pattern. Yeah, it's just unbelievable. The neglect and the callousness of somebody making this kind of money. And then of course, once again, where is the fourth estate here? When the Daily News reporter went to Mr. Ogden and said, how about this, Mr. Ogden? What did Mr. Ogden say? Well, he didn't say anything because his secretary told me he was out in the field. Out in the field means he hasn't come in yet, but we expect him sometime today before closing time, right? He stepped away from his desk. Don't look for him for another 3 hours. Yeah. But again, this is the fourth estate. They should be. Maybe they are. Maybe the letter ran today. Maybe the story will come out tomorrow or the next day. But if it doesn't, then stop calling yourself a newspaper, because you're not. All right, going on to the next item on the card here. I got about 9 more minutes, 6 furlongs more until I reach the finish line today. Grievance versus Berg. More about the Guam Board of Medical Examiners and its chairman, Nathaniel Berg. Petition seeks GBME chairman's removal. A Change.org petition is seeking the removal of Dr. Nathaniel Berg from the Guam Board of Medical Examiners. Quote, please help us protect injured or killed patients due to medical substandard care and or medical negligence by Guam doctors. Please help to protect victims of sexual misconduct by Guam doctors. Oh, this is to Berg, not to Chief Ignacio. Yet, the petition began proceeding into a narrative statements and allegations. Requests for comment about the petition from Berg and Governor Leon Guerrero were not returned as of press time. Berg currently serves as chairman of the Guam Board of Medical Examiners. As of Friday night, the petition had more than 200 signatures. Once again, it's kind of easy to get people to sign stuff, right? If you approach somebody to sign something, most people just don't have the heart to turn you down. I know this from approaching people to sign my nomination petitions for the legislature. Even people that I think probably really didn't like me. What am I going to do, But then if it's online, it's so easy. So it's kind of like the anonymous letter that the media loves so much. So 200 signatures, it's important, but I'm not going to give it that much weight. David Lebowski, who has pursued lawsuits and board complaints following the death of his son in 2018, said he wrote the narrative in the petition while another person posted it. Lebowski said many people have contacted him expressing frustration with the GBME. Meanwhile, Lebowski has been critical of Berg and said he has his own frustrations with the board regarding an initial complaint he filed related to his son's death. But the petition is not about its authors, Lebowski said. He said it's about victims of substandard medical care or negligence, victims of sexual misconduct by doctors, and about a failed system that he said protects doctors but not patients. The petition is to give the people of Guam a voice of no confidence in Berg and the GBME, Lebowski said. And I have an article that ran on the 20th of March, which is, let's see, Friday, right?
Yesterday.
Sunday. That's right, Sunday. This ran on Sunday, so it's relevant. And this one ran in the Post. Lack of resources hinders medical board's ability to investigate. In answer to senators' questions about why some complaints investigated by the GBME drag and complainants aren't updated regularly, representatives said they don't have the necessary investigators or a board attorney. Back to my advice to John Fernandez. The GBME is investigating several complaints against doctors. During a hearing held last month, board officials said some of the investigations date back to 2019. That's even slower than the police department. They better hire that girl from GPD to be their spokesperson to provide the necessary apologetic language as a mother, as a woman, as a mother, and as someone who has seen this kind of stuff before.
As an owner of a red Jeep?
Yeah. There were concerns that we're not staying and touching up with the complainants. And senators think we're dragging them out. Well, some do drag out because of our lack of resources. GBME board member Phil Flores said, Speaker Therese Tetlahi, chairperson for the 36th Legislature's Committee on Health, held a legislative review into the board's processes and procedures after receiving concerns from complainants, some of whom have not received an update on their case since it was filed. During the oversight hearing in February, the speaker found out that GBME did not have written policies. She suggested they put things in black and white. Boy, that Teresa's got a mind like us. You don't have policies? I have an idea. Put it down in black and white. Flores, during a recent GBME board meeting, noted that the policies to be developed are really putting what they already practice onto paper. But I think in our written practices, I would like to see deadlines and maybe some monthly reporting, Flores added. And Flores said the board members also have their own regular full-time jobs. He pointed out that some of the board members work 12-hour days and may become preoccupied, which could mean reports aren't filed. And I remember reading one of these articles where Dr. Annette David was assigned, I think it was the Acoma complaint. She was assigned to investigate. Well, doctors aren't investigators. That's just horrible. to put a doctor in a situation like that, potentially even exposing the doctor to some liability.
So if she's a doctor and an investigator, can we ask for a second opinion?
Why not? Okay, that's why we need investigators, said Chairman Nathaniel Berg, stressing the larger issue. Because in typical board environments, the physicians and public members of the board do not directly contact the complainant. We discuss them, and the investigators are handled by investigators and administrators, staff who are trained to do so and are also trained to communicate with complainants, and that's their job. The investigator would be tasked with communicating updates to complainants and the board, a task they're currently struggling to keep up with. That's the real solution. I agree with Berg. Rob Weinberg, an assistant attorney general appointed to the board, and GBME administrative staff have been discussing creating job description and classification. But in the meantime, Weinberg said Tetlahi suggested the GBME issue a request for proposal or a small purchase order for a professional services contract. Berg indicated that hiring a professional investigator would eat up the rest of their funding for the fiscal year, which according to the financial report is $71,000. Well, Weinberg is an assistant attorney general appointed as board legal counsel. He pointed out that the board also needs to hire its own attorney. I'm going to finish up with this tomorrow. But right now it's time for me to come back and tell you, let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Kyiv shelling attack. I'm Laura Cantor, Fox News. Shelling in a neighborhood in Kyiv, Ukraine, destroying a shopping center. Emergency services reporting the overnight shelling killing at least 4 people. Emergency services containing ammonia leak in the Ukrainian city of Sumy. Ukraine rejecting Russia's demand to give up Mariupol. A landmine in Bovary, Ukraine, injuring many U.S. volunteer fighters. American volunteer fighter Red Taylor talking about his driver saving the life of one of his colleagues.
He saved his life because the vehicle started burning. There was another landmine behind, right next to the back right tire, and when I stepped out of the vehicle is when I noticed it, because I stepped here and I saw a landmine between my legs. So we got the hell away from the vehicle, because that's what you got to do.
Volunteer combat medic Alexis Antia explaining her reason for coming to Ukraine.
I felt like it was the right thing to do. I feel like what's happening here, what Putin is doing is evil, and there's no reason to be putting all of these people, millions and millions of people, through the suffering and torment that they're going through, and I felt like I needed to be here and try to help in any way that I can.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas admitted to the hospital on Friday with flu-like symptoms.
The High Court saying in a press release Sunday that Justice Thomas was admitted to a Washington hospital Friday with flu-like symptoms. He's been diagnosed with an infection. The statement went on to say Justice Thomas's symptoms are abating and he expects to be released from the hospital within a day or two. The justices are set to hear oral arguments on Monday, but the court indicated Thomas would not take part remotely, but would rather participate in the consideration and discussion through court records and audio of the arguments.
Fox's Ted Lindner. Thomas on the Supreme Court since 1991. Hearings for Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson starting Monday. Shanghai Disneyland closing down due to COVID surge in China. America's listening to Fox News.
Jason in the House, the Jason Chaffetz podcast. There is always someone doing something stupid somewhere. Dive deeper than the headlines and the party lines as I take on American life, politics, and entertainment. Join me, Jason Chaffetz, every Wednesday as I shed light on the news and make some predictions along the way. You never know who will drop in. Subscribe now on FoxNewsPodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen, then swipe right and hear the latest news updates on your time. And scroll down to hear the latest podcasts from Fox News. And it's even easier to listen in the car with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Get programming alerts and notifications. Fox News Audio is on the Fox News app. The voices America trusts. Download it now.
Some Americans might be getting a gas tax holiday. Governors around the U.S. proposing the holiday to help ease the burden of high gas prices.
Virginia Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin is asking lawmakers in his state to approve a gas tax holiday.
I just saw a study recently that suggested that for the average American family, inflation was going to cost them $2,000 this year.
He said eliminating 26 cents a gallon for 3 months should help, along with additional tax cuts. To those who say giving consumers more money to spend right now could actually worsen inflation, Youngkin said,
I don't agree that providing tax breaks and giving money back to people that's actually theirs to begin with is anything other than good.
Not everyone wants to go the gas tax route, though. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer is proposing other forms of tax relief, saying a gas tax holiday wouldn't do enough. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
A charity event last week to raise money for Ukrainian refugees, featuring a very unique artist.
That painting, Sunrise March, was painted in the New York studio of Polish-American artist Agnieszka Pilat. The artist was a dog named Spot, a robotic dog selling online for $75,000 from Boston Dynamics. Pilat saying the paint impressions from Spot's marching feet represent millions of Ukrainian refugees marching towards Poland. The auction this past Friday night at the San Francisco home of Olympic gold medal figure skater Brian Boitano and his partner was part of a larger ticketed event, which so far has raised over $250,000. Paul Stevens, Fox News.
NHL's trade deadline day has arrived. Fox's Matt Napolitano with the details.
Well, the New York Rangers already acquired Frank Vatrano from the Florida Panthers, and the Chicago Blackhawks shipped Brandon Hagel to the Tampa Bay Lightning. More moves are expected before today's 3 p.m. Eastern deadline. The Washington Capitals, St. Louis Blues, and Toronto Maple Leafs are expected to be buyers to build for a postseason run, while the Anaheim Ducks and Detroit Red Wings are anticipated to be among the sellers, ramping up draft stock to prepare for the future.
I'm Laura Cantor, and this is Fox News.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts.